Do you really think America is only what they show you in Hollywood movies, while the world often views the United States as a superpower? With a thriving economy, a global giant, a dream world destination, and the epicenter of Hollywood glamour, there is a seldom explored dimension that lurks in the shadows. Beyond the positive narratives lies a different story, one that unravels the darker sides of the great American dream, the face which they never really show. Focusing on the persistent issue of poverty. Yes, you heard it right. Deep poverty.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't.
Poverty agonizes in the largest global economy, the United States. The most recent data from the United States Census Bureau reveals that nearly 12% of the population, equivalent to 37.9 million Americans, lived in poverty in 2021. And the situation has not much improved in 2024 even. This figure is comparable to the 2020 level, where 37 million people experienced poverty. In 1970, the poverty rate was approximately 12%, shedding light on the less discussed aspect of the American dream. While poverty has seen a decline over the decades in the U.S., it is becoming entrenched, particularly within certain demographic groups. Referred to as deep poverty by the US Census Bureau, or simply extreme poverty. About 48% of those in poverty in the U.S. have cash incomes below 50% of the national poverty threshold, $35.90 per capita annually. Deep poverty, as economists observe, tends to be chronic, with a generation in deep poverty likely passing it on to the next. It creates a poverty trap. The question then arises, why do people become or remain poor in the USA?
When you finally feel like giving up, oh God, no luck. Everything feels like you're sticky stuck. I'm lost, handcuffed to the bed where I sleep. Don't give a fuck, can't stop, unplug, feeling over.
Many argue that the affluent nation has turned a blind eye to poverty. Matthew Desmond, a sociologist and Pulitzer Prize winner for his book, Evicted Poverty and Profit in the American City, explores this persistent question in his new book, Poverty by America. Desmond offers an answer that some in the U.S. may view as a leftist critique. He frames chronic poverty in the U.S. as a class war, waged by the rich and privileged, wealthy Americans and corporations, to maintain the status quo for the poor. This is because persistent poverty translates into profits for corporations, the poor, preoccupied with making ends meet, become a cheap and exploitable labor force, boosting corporate profits. Desmond argues that capitalism, at its core, involves workers striving for more while owners aim to give as little as possible. America's poverty, he contends, is not due to a lack of resources, but a deficiency in a system that encourages inclusive growth for all. Instead, he asserts that the U.S. system supports the privileged and corporations, allowing them to profit at the expense of the general population, from tax breaks to social supports. Desmond lists various anti-poverty, or income support measures that primarily benefit the non-poor. He sees this as a designed class war. Americans, in Desmond's perspective, unintentionally become adversaries of the poor. He points out in an interview with CNBC, "We have this national entitlement program that's just not for the poor. In 2020, the nation spent $53 billion on direct housing assistance to the needy. Things like public housing or vouchers that reduced rent burden. That same year, we spent over $190 billion on homeowner tax subsidies. In a New York Times essay, he notes, "Poverty persists in America because many of us benefit from it. We enjoy cheap goods and services and plump returns on our investments, even as they often require a kind of human sacrifice in the form of worker maltreatment. Amid the world's fastest wealth creation, inequality is reaching crisis levels." Desmond's analysis of chronic poverty in the U.S. emphasizes that even one of the wealthiest countries will grapple with it, unless inequality is addressed, and anti-poverty programs are effectively targeted. Another resultant issue of the poverty in the United States silently pervades the lives of millions is the growing mental health crisis. Among the glittering front of progress and prosperity, an increasing number of Americans find themselves entangled in the complex web of mental health disorders, shining a spotlight on the urgent need for comprehensive reform and societal understanding. The prevalence of mental health disorders in the U.S. has been steadily rising. Conditions such as anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, impact millions of lives. Yet the stigma surrounding mental health often prevents individuals from seeking the help they desperately need. A significant hurdle in addressing the mental health crisis lies in the inadequate access to mental health services. Many Americans, particularly those in underserved communities, face barriers such as high costs, limited availability of providers, and insufficient insurance coverage, leaving them without proper care and support. The persistent stigma attached to mental health issues remains a formidable barrier. Misconceptions and discrimination can lead to individuals suffering in silence, afraid to share their struggles with friends, family, or employers, further exacerbating the crisis. Beyond the personal toll on individuals, the mental health crisis has broader societal implications: decreased productivity in the workplace, strained relationships, and an overall diminished quality of life for those affected underscore the urgency of addressing mental health on a national scale. 9 in 10 Americans believe America is facing a mental health crisis. The new suicide death data reported by CDC illustrates too many people still believe asking for help is a sign of weakness, said HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra. The Biden-Harris administration is making unprecedented investments to transform how mental health is understood, accessed, and treated as part of President Biden's unity agenda. We must continue to eliminate the stigmatization of mental health and make care available to all Americans.
That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.